Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for November 4th through 10th. This week I read 3 books, I watched 3 shows, I listened to 1 podcast, and I listened to 2 books. First this week I read The Haunted Mansion by Joshua Williamson. This book was left over from the random things I picked up to read before Halloween and features a story of a boy and his grandfather. The boy is timid and his grandfather is full of adventure, and events turn so that the boy has to go into the haunted mansion to save his grandfather. It's a graphic novel for children and normally it would take me no time at all to read, but I was still sick this week and when my sick body sees a book it thinks nap. So I ended up reading this over a 3-hour period. The art was spooky and I got to revisit my favorite Disney attractions, so this was a good time. On the 5th of November I started reading V for Vendetta by Alan Moore. For me this might be a case of the movie is better than the book. The faces of all the government characters are too similar, and I often had no idea who was in the scene unless it was V, the one character whose dialogue was written in a Scottish vernacular, or Evie. The story was still there and I enjoyed the experience for the most part, and I was glad to find out that the iconic line, "Ideas are bulletproof," came from the original book, but now I just want to watch the movie instead. Finally, I read Something Borrowed by Paul Magers. There's not enough vowels in this name. Finally, I read Something Borrowed by Paul Magers. This author was recommended to me by a friend, and since this was the only book that the library carried, I took it out just assuming I was going to read a cozy mystery. Firstly, this is the second in a series, but so much of the book goes into catching the reader up on what happened in the first volume that wasn't really an issue. Secondly, this is so much more than just a run-of-the-mill cozy mystery. Brenda, our protagonist, started her life as the Bride of Frankenstein and has been living in hiding all over the UK ever since. She is currently over 200 years old and retired to run a B&B in Whitby. Her best friend and neighbor Effie is descended from a long line of witches, and occasionally they solve mysteries together after being charged to guard the Bitch's Maw, which from my understanding is a gateway to hell. They are called upon to find out who has been sending poison pen letters to a local hotel owner. This has all the English charm, old lady wit, and romantic intrigue that you'd want in a cozy mystery, but with a ton of magic and science fiction elements. If my library had more volumes, I'd read them all. This week I finished the 14th season of Grey's Anatomy, in which so much happened, as is the case with all of the seasons, but at least the cliffhanger wasn't dire. I also recently acquired the first season of the second spin-off series, Station 19, so I look forward to diving into that soon. It centers around Seattle's fire department. I of course have already watched all 5 seasons of the first spin-off, Private Practice. As for Survivor, we watched most of the 12th season, and I just really hope Shane doesn't win this one. Who decides to quit a 3-pack-a-day habit by going on Survivor and doesn't realize that you're going to be nicking out the entire time? He's unstable, cruel, and I need him to go home. As for season 37, there was some hinting that they were going to try to blindside my favorite character, but they haven't done that yet. The previews for the next episode hint that he might be fair game this coming week, but I hope that's not the case. This week I also joined the fandom for Steven Universe, which is just hilarious and adorable. The runtime of these episodes is only about 10 minutes, so my friend and I watched 16 episodes while having gin drinks and snacks. The show centers around the Crystal Gems, 3 gems that save the world on a daily basis, and their ward, Steven. His mother gave up her physical form so he could be born, and now he's trying to figure out his gem powers with the help of Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. His father is also around but has been thoroughly warned to stay away from the magic stuff. The situations are silly and inventive, the dialogue had me cracking up, and I'm excited to watch more. This week when I was between audiobooks and didn't have a Wi-Fi connection, I finally listened to a podcast that I had downloaded episodes of ages ago. I kind of stopped listening to podcasts when I realized that I could be listening to audiobooks, in part because there's more to say about audiobooks in these wrap-ups. And it felt like I was constantly just mentioning sequels that I couldn't really talk about when it came to the podcast portion of the video. Anyway, I finally started Anthropocene Reviewed and I give it 4 stars. John Green takes 2 unconnected items or concepts from the Anthropocene, the period of time that commenced when humans started making a significant impact on the Earth's geology and ecosystem, and after talking them through, reviews them on a 5-star scale. He has a pleasant voice, approaches his topics with wit, and I feel like I'm getting so much more than just facts when listening to it. This week for my local Nerdfighter book club, I listened to The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. We figured it had been a while since we'd done a nonfiction book, and because it's Nonfiction November, we landed on this one. I thought going into the book that there would be a lot of sciencey words that would trip up my reading experience, and a lot of injustice that would make me angry enough that I would want to throw the book, so the audiobook seemed like a good idea. I ended up being less angry than I thought I would be. I'm still furious over how minorities have been experimented on without their consent throughout medical history, but this story was never one of wanting to take the patient's cells for profit, which is what I had assumed. Yes, other companies do sell Henrietta cells for profit, but the organization that originally harvested them did so for scientific research. And gaining medical consent was nowhere near usual, never mind the norm of ethics of the time. I still have empathy for the Lax family who can barely afford their own medical care, but that seems to be a symptom of the US healthcare as a whole as opposed to this specific situation. This was full of fascinating history and makes me appreciate how far the medical field has come in terms of informed consent. Finally, I listened to I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. This book is about Julia, whose older sister has recently died, leaving her family in turmoil. Although Olga and Julia were born in Chicago, both of their parents are undocumented and work long hours for very little pay to support them. Julia's mother, in particular, has some harsh views when it comes to raising a good Mexican girl, and Julia is much more feminist and introverted than her parents can understand. When Julia finds some questionable items in Olga's room, she wonders if she ever knew her submissive, quiet sister at all, and goes on a mission to solve the mystery she's uncovered. There were several times throughout this book where I sympathized with Julia over the obnoxious nonsense her mother was putting her through. Her mother never listened to her and always treated her like she was a bad person. And that built throughout the novel. I will say that there are trigger warnings for depression and self-harm in this book, so tread with caution if need be. Although this book, through Julia's world, treated gay characters with respect, she explained to her elders in one scene that gay people are born that way and Christianity should love and accept everyone. There were many random insults hurled around her that didn't sit right. One involved saying that a character dressed like a homeless lesbian. Although I can't think of the exact wording, I think I recall some ableist language as well. Julia is incredibly judgmental at times, which I guess makes sense for a 15-year-old girl, but left me as a reader very uncomfortable. I wanted her to smarten all the way up, as she was halfway there with her feminist views, and for her parents to treat her like a real person instead of a problem, which is the crux of the conflict in this novel. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!